Can you repeat that?
Tet Amud Aleph, three lines from the bottom. The Gemara says, "Daberna beoznei ha'am." Speak in the ears of the people. V'yishalu ish met re'u v'isha met re'uta klei chesed v'klei zahav. That's the continuation of the pasuk. What shall I speak in the ears of the people? Hashem is asking Moshe Rabbeinu. It says, ask them to go to the neighbors and borrow vessels of gold and silver. So Gemara says, Amr deber Rabbi Yanai. They explain in the study hall of Rabbi Yanai, what does it mean na, daber na? Please speak. And na means please ask. Why is he asking? Why didn't he do it in a sensitive manner? אמר לה הקדוש ברוך הוא למשה, בבקשה ממך, לך ואמור להם לישראל, בבקשה מכם, שאלו מצרים כלי חלב וכלי זהב, שלא יאמר, ט עמוד ב', שלא יאמר אותו צדיק, ועבדו ועינו אותם כי הם בהם. ואחרי כן יצאו ברכוש גדול, לא קיים בהם. מה says, הקדוש ברוך הוא is asking for Moshe Rabbeinu, please go ahead and ask them for those vessels. Why? Because there is a promise. There's an ancient promise to Avraham Avinu that I told him, ועבדו ועינו אותם 400 שנה, ואחר כן יצאו ברכוש גדול. So I told him, you know, in the future your children will be slaves in Egypt for 400 years. But then, when they're going to leave with a lot of money, a lot of possessions. So, if they're going to leave without the money, then Avraham Avinu, this tzaddik, will say, so you know how to punish the Jewish people. But when they deserve to get something, money, you don't give them anything.
They get paid for 200 years of
right?
work.
You don't. Yeah. I have to give them something. Yeah, right. But anyway, you promise something, and you have to keep. Yeah, Hashem is Avraham would say if that Hashem, so to speak, didn't keep his word because they got punished. They were slaves, but they didn't leave with klei kesef v'klei za'av, with gold and silver. But the famous question we have here: why did we need Avraham Avinu to get involved with all the story? If Hashem said something, if Hashem promised, then he needs to keep his word, right? It doesn't matter if it's Avraham Avinu interfering, or going to ask questions, or Avraham Avinu not going to ask questions. Who cares? If Hashem said something, then it has to come true, right? That's the question that we ask. And what's the answer? You remember the answer? What's the answer? The answer is that really the blessing of gold and silver is really from the Red Sea in the future after 7 days. But Hashem didn't want Am Yisrael, Avraham Avinu, to challenge him or to ask this question for this short period of time of 7 days. Okay? So the promise, of course, will come true. But when in Red Sea, not before. But I didn't want Avraham Avinu to ask questions. That's why he says, okay, you know what? I just want to satisfy Avraham Avinu. I don't want him to ask questions. Let them ask from their neighbors vessels of gold and silver for them to leave, in order for them to leave Egypt with money. Ma says, what was the answer?
You know where all the things were during Kosher.
Yeah, of course. Based on the Midrash, they knew where all the places are. Because if they're going to say, hey, we don't have, it's okay, no problem. You don't have? Let me help you. Let me help you find your vessels. He goes to the bedroom, he opens the second drawer. On the corner, here's the bundle of dollars. Yeah, $10,000 there. Okay, the Gemara says, what's the answer of Am Yisrael? Amar le'amuleo, Bnei Yisrael respond to Moshe Rabbeinu, והלוואי שנצא מעצמנו, we wish we could leave Egypt without any money. Because we just want to leave. We don't want to be bothered with taking this, taking that, money. Yeah, that's what we're going to learn later on. We don't want to schlep also, yeah. Mashal Adam, example to a person, he was in prison for many years. People will tell him, you know, tomorrow you're on the list of the prisoners that would leave prison. And tomorrow they will also give you a lot of money. They will it's a pay time tomorrow. A paycheck. Payday. It's a payday. They're going to give you a check and write you a nice check tomorrow. Yeah. He said, you know what? Let me leave today. Don't bother about the money. just let me leave. I'm just waiting to leave this place. If I can leave today without the money, just let me leave without the money tomorrow. That's the same answer that Am Yisrael respond to Moshe Rabbeinu. You telling us, go, stay here for a while, go and ask for money, this and that. No, we want to leave today, and we don't want to take all this money. We don't need this money. Okay.
What are they going to do with it in the desert?
What?
What are they going to do with it in the desert?
They will. Hashem promised them the place. They promised the land, Eretz Canaan. The desert. What they did was that they gave a lot of it to the tabernacle, the Mishkan. They donated a lot of money. But Tzalach has a question. Tzalach is the Noda B'Yehuda, 200 years ago. He says the example is not exactly the same thing, because the story is there's a prisoner that wants to leave today, not tomorrow. But this story about borrowing gold and silver from the Egyptians, it doesn't really stop them from leaving Egypt. They will leave Egypt when they're supposed to leave. It's not really depending on the money. So he goes through a different answer. That will answer later on. The Gemara says, "Vayishalum, Amar Rabbi Ami, melemed shishilum ba'al kocham." When the pasuk says Vayishalum, with the mem, we learn that they borrow the gold and silver against their will. They didn't really want to do it. Who didn't want to give? Who is the one that didn't want to do it? Is it referring to the Egyptians or referring to the Jewish people? Man says two opinions. Some hold that it was against the will of the Jewish people. They forced them to borrow the money from the Egyptians. They didn't want to, but they forced them. Moshe Rabbeinu forced them. Some hold that was against the will of the Jewish of the Israel. That the Egyptians forced them to take the money. They didn't want. The Egyptians went outside. They said, "Hey, take the money," and they didn't. The Jewish people didn't want. So the first opinion is that the Egyptians didn't want. Okay, so the Jewish people forced the Egyptians to give the money. That's the midrash that you explained before. The Makat Choshech, they didn't. The plague of Choshech, they didn't really. They knew exactly where all the money is, because they forced the Egyptians to give the money. And some say no, the Am Yisrael didn't want to take the money, and the Egyptians forced the Am Yisrael to take the money. And each one has a source. Baal Kocham Mitzri, according to one that says that it was against the will of the Egyptians. Ichtiv, u'nevad bayit techalek shalal. What is nevad bayit techalek shalal? And what is nevad bayit? Nevad bayit is Am Yisrael, right? Those that lived in that place. Shalal is it's what you get from the war, right? The booty. When you get from the war, that's shalal. That's what you say, no?
Shalal.
Shalal. Yeah. So shalal is not something that you get without forcing somebody else, right? There's a war, you kill the enemies, and then you take the booty. So the same thing here. Shalal also, since you call it shalal, it's like you're forcing them to give you the money. So from here we learn that. Yeah, I saw shalal navos, right? Shalal navos. So this is the source. Yeah, this is the source that they forced the Egyptians. So what's the source and why? Including the one that says that Am Yisrael were forced. Why? One says mishum masoy. What is masoy? It was a burden. It was difficult for them to carry all this in the desert. They didn't know where they're going, and now you're asking them to carry the money. They didn't want to do it. So it's enough that we leave. We don't need all this money. Man says. וינצלו את מצרים, אמר ביעמי ולמד שעשו כמצודה שאין בתגן. So the Gemara says, what does it mean וינצלו את מצרים? Man says they empty up Egypt just as a trap of birds that there's nothing there. Usually a trap of birds, there's some pieces of grain, right? Wheat grain, barley grain, whatever the birds are eating. What?
Bird seed.
Bird seeds, yeah. And this trap, and those days the trap used to be that they dig a hole in the floor. They dig a hole in the earth, and then they put this this piece of wood hanging on top of this above this pit, and there's a stick holding it. So the bird goes inside, and once he touches the stick, it falls down on him, and he's catched. He's a trap. Okay, so this pit didn't even have this seeds. Okay, so they was empty. So that's what they did to Egypt. They emptied up Egypt, and they didn't have any money. If they empty up Egypt like the sea that doesn't have any fish. In other words, they empty up Egypt from the money. Okay, and it's not that each one is giving example. One, the Ben Ish Chai explains that when they say that they empty up Egypt from the grain, from the seeds, from the bird seeds, is talking about the physical part of Egyptian, and Shtaki is referring to the spiritual side that once they left, this place became corrupt, and people were very evil because when there's Jews, I don't know if you can say.
Was it corrupt to begin with?
Yeah, it was very corrupt. But once you take the Jewish people, it becomes super corrupt, right? They empty up.
Super corrupt.
They empty up Egypt from any morality. Okay. Yeah.
So why
There's
did
a very shortly. There's a very interesting article of a Greek journalist. Greek journalist that he said that we did a terrible thing by kicking out so many Jews from Europe, especially killing 6 million Jews, and we lost all the financial benefits and all the blessings, the wisdom, and what do we have now? And what do we have now? We have all the radicals, all the Islam that they are destroying the city, destroying the state. A very interesting article. Okay, the Gemara says, let's see a bit more and up to the Mishnah. What does it mean? So we know that there was an argument between Moshe Rabbeinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu for 7 days, and one of the things that he told them is It explains, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, go to Am Yisrael, go to the Jewish people and tell them, Now what does it mean, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe. This is what Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. I will be with you now in Egypt when you're under the control of the Egyptians and your slaves, but I will also be with you in the future when you will also be under the control of other nations. I will always be with you to help you and to support you. The Gemara says, why do you want to mention the Jewish people that in the future they will also be under some evil kingdoms, evil enemies? It's enough that they know it now, what they're going through now. Why do you want to tell them what's going to be in the future? Man says, so he said, no, go, just mention that I will be with you now, I will support you. Now, don't tell him anything about the future. Okay. So that's why it says twice, I will be with you now, and I will be with you in the future. Now, I'm telling you, Moshe Rabbeinu, that I'm going to be with Am Yisrael in the future when they go through difficulties. But don't tell them that. Don't tell them. Don't mention it to them. Mention only that I'm going to be with him now. Okay. Gemara says, Anani Hashem Anani. So once we ask the question, why is it double language? Why is it twice? Gemara now wants to also talk about the double word of Anani Hashem Anani. Hashem, please answer me, answer me. It says twice. Why are you saying it twice? That's about what Eliyahu Navi, when they had this argument with the false idol worshippers at the time of Eliyahu Navi. Carmel, yeah, Baal, Neviah Baal, and so they went to this place, Har Carmel, and they have this argument. Each one has his altar, and he's telling him, Eliyahu is telling them, okay, let's see let's see your God, let's see the power of your God. Okay, and then finally when it got to Eliyahu Navi, so he said, Aneni Hashem Aneni. So it's reflecting two different things. Man says, Amar b'Yavahu, Lama Amar Eliyahu Navi Anani shte pa'amim. Why did he say it twice? מלמד שאמר אליהו לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, ריבונו של עולם, ענני שתרד אש מן השמיים, ותאכל כל אשר על המזבח, וענני שתסיח דעתם כדי שלא יאמרו מעשה כשפים. שנאמר, ואתה סיבות את ליבם אחרונים. He says, I said twice, the first one in the first prayer is, please bring some spiritual fire from heaven that will consume the sacrifice that I'm offering to you. And the second aneni is, please make them understand and realize that this fire is not magic or witchcraft. It's really spiritual fire from heaven, and that's because you are God, and that's what you do, and showing everyone that you're the real God. You shall convince them and change their ways. Okay, they're going backwards. The heart is going one direction. Now we have to switch, we have to change it to be in a different direction. And what we learn here is something very, very interesting. That's if you don't show to a person, if a person has his heart in one place, right? If you're not going to prove to him 100%, prove that he's wrong, it will be very difficult to convince him. And Eliyahu Navi knew that. He says, what do you mean? Fire from heaven. Who could bring fire from heaven? Right? But still, Eliyahu Navi was not satisfied. Why? Because maybe they will say, he's a magician. Yeah, but if it's that's a magician, what about you? Can't you find some magicians that can do the same thing? No. Yeah. They will say the same thing. So you see, when the heart is one place, and you want to convince somebody logically, you have to provide 100% proof. If not, we're very difficult to convince him. Well, and that's what that's what we're going through today, right? If you see the media today, the people have their hearts in one place, and we are trying to prove. 90%, 99%, it's not enough for them. They need 100%. That's what we learned.
But we did that. But we did that.
Yeah, and still, one second,
and they lie. And they lie. They were saying that they were not using the hospital, and the American media said the same thing. That they even on NYC.
That's why we need to pray. That's why we need to pray.
Exactly.
That's
I agree.
So besides 100% proof, we also have to pray just as Eliyahu Navi did. We start with the Mishnah. Okay.